যে আনিল প্রেমাদান পরম কাচু
Here we are. Om Ajnana-timirandasya Janana Salakaya Chaksura-milidam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya-manobhistam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati sa pandamtikam Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Jatapatakabalam Sri Gurum Vaishnavamscha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahaguna Raghunatan Nitam Shritam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Varijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padam Sahaguna Lalita Sri Vishakanatamscha. We are reading from Bhagavad-gita as it is, translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. The 8th chapter of the Bhagavad-gita is entitled Attaining the Supreme, and it describes how one can attain the supreme goal. What is the supreme goal? Is it to make $1 million? Is it to move to Sweet Waters? Is that what it's called? Right? The best place? Sweet Waters? Isn't it called that? Is that the goal? To have 7 cars? 20 children? What is the goal? The goal is to attain the Supreme. So what is the Supreme? The Supreme is that which has no equal. That is one of the definitions of Supreme. He who is without any equal, he is Supreme. He is without beginning and without end, who is the oldest of all and yet ever fresh and young, who is everywhere and yet is also within his supreme abode. So that Supreme has been described as Swayam Bhagavan Sri Krishna. And to attain his lotus feet is the actual goal of yoga. So now we find in the 8th chapter, Krishna says, O best of the Bharatas. Who is that? Arjuna. O best of the Bharatas, I shall now explain to you the different times at which, passing away from this world, the yogi does or does not come back. It seems from this verse that we are about to read now, these verses, that the time at which one leaves his body is very important in determining whether or not one will come back. What does it mean, coming back? When the body dies, first of all, we must understand who we are. Just like you are wearing this shirt. Wait, let me see what it's. Chicago Bears. Now, are you and your shirt the same, or are you different than your shirt?
I'm different.
Okay. That means that today you're wearing your Chicago Bears shirt, and tomorrow you could be wearing a different shirt. But you are the same person. Agreed? Okay. Now I have another question. What is your age? Okay, good. When you were a small baby, right? Where is that body that you had when you were a small baby? Where is that body gone? Is it the same body that you have now? It looks very different to me. I'm sure it looks different to your parents also. Did you know that every 7 years, all the different cells in the body change? And it's mentioned that just as a person puts on one shirt, takes it off, and puts on another shirt, in the same way, the soul changes bodies. Do you know what the soul is?
No, not really.
Okay. Show me your arm. Okay, let me see your hand. Okay. Whose hand is it?
Mine.
Who is that I? Who are you? You say it's my hand. Who are you?
Control the side.
Huh?
Control the side.
Do this. He says his name.
Very good answer, but it's wrong. You are not Keto Desai. You are someone different. Now we must understand this. You see, all these years they've been telling you you're Keto Desai, but actually that is not true. You have a different identity. And today I have come here just to teach you about this. People have been misteaching you about who you are. Now, when I say, this is my hand, do I say I hand? No, my hand, right? My hand, my arm, my body. Not I hand, I arm, and I body. So I am different than my body. I am the owner of my body. Is that clear? My shirt means I own my shirt. My body means I own my body. So I and the body are different. The I is the soul, what we call the soul. It's the self within. Sometimes you may hear your conscience speaking to you, some inner voice. That voice is speaking to your soul. The soul is who you really are, and it's different than the body. Right now we cannot see the soul. It is very, very fine, small particle, and it cannot be seen. But it is the powerhouse for this body. When the soul leaves the body, at the time when if the soul leaves the body, a person will die. Because the soul is like the energetic source of life within the body. So, here it mentions that one may or may not come back, means that when the soul leaves the body, it is like a person leaving his house. You leave one house and you may move to a new home. Just like when your body gets old, the soul gives up that body and it goes into a new body. But if one is a perfect yogi, then he doesn't have to take another material birth. What happens? There are different possible things that can happen. There are different possible goals. One thing is that one could go to a higher material planet. It's called Svargaloka. There are higher planets in this universe where there is much greater facilities. Did you see the movie E.T.? I thought so. So you must realize now that there is life on other planets, right? Do you believe that? You didn't see the movie E.T.? Then why don't you believe that there's life on other planets? Well, you're right in one sense. There is no such thing as ETs. That is only a imaginary movie figure. But according to the Vedas, there are other planets that sustain life. In fact, there's life on every planet, not just planet Earth. Even if you haven't read about it in your little history books or geography books, that's unfortunate. But that's the problem with going to these schools, and you have to come regularly to the temple, to our Sunday school at the temple, in order to get this education. So one could go to a higher material planet, Svargaloka, or there is a place beyond Svarga, not quite in the spiritual world, in between position, and that is called Brahman Paramatma. That means the eternal Brahma Jyoti, the light, the glaring effulgence, which is the space between the material creation and the spiritual world. In between is the effulgent light. And if you are an impersonalist yogi, if you're simply meditating on, say, Paramatma or on Brahman, then you can merge into that Brahma Jyoti and become one speck of shining light. Or, if you are a very perfect yogi, you can go beyond the Brahma Jyoti into the spiritual sky, which has spiritual planets. And on each planet you will find Lord Narayan, is in different forms, being worshipped by his eternal devotees. And the highest of all the planets in that spiritual sky is where God has 2 arms. Because you know how many arms does Narayan have? 4. But in the highest part of the spiritual sky, first you come to Ayodhya, where Ram is present, and his eternal devotees. And then above that comes Dwarka, and above that comes Mathura, and then finally comes Vrindavan. So Vrindavan, Mathura, and Dwarka, Krishna is present there with his eternal devotees. So that is the destination of the perfect yogis, the bhakti yogis. So here it mentions that some come back to this material world and some don't, and it depends upon the time when they die. You remember Bhishma, how he was waiting for the right time? You all saw Mahabharata or read it, right? Bhishma had the power to decide when he would leave, and he was waiting for the proper time. Remember that?
Yes.
This is the reason, explaining here. Those who know the Supreme Brahman, that means the Supreme Brahman, okay, attain that Supreme by passing away from the world during the influence of the fiery God, in the light, at an auspicious moment of the day, during the fortnight of the waxing moon, or during the 6 months when the sun travels in the north. Prabhupada says, this is, at the time of death, this is for someone who wants to attain the Brahma Jyoti, that effulgent light I was telling you about, who wants to merge and become one with the Brahman. Mystics who are advanced in yoga practice can arrange the time and place to leave the body. There's a system by which you meditate upon the soul and the life air and the prana, and you bring up the life force within the different chakras of the body until finally you come up to the Brahmarundra. There's a space in the head by which the soul can depart. So the yogis are able, at that moment they fix their meditation on the goal, and then the soul bursts out of the top of the head. I think there's a picture in here which shows this. Yeah. You see? Can you see how the soul is bursting out at the top of the head? So how would you like to be like this person? With your Chicago Bears shirt on. Be quite a contrast. You'd probably be the first person wearing a Chicago Bears shirt to do this. Yeah. So, now we can see from this statement that there are many conditions that one has to fulfill to get to the right moment. You can't just die at any moment if you're going to be this type of a yogi. The mystic who passes away from the world during the smoke, the night, the fortnight of the waning moon, or the 6 months when the sun passes to the south, reaches the moon planet, but again comes back. These elevated souls live on the moon for about 10,000 years by the calculation of the demigods, and enjoy life by drinking somaras. They eventually return to Earth. This means that on the moon there are higher classes of living beings, though they may not be perceived by the gross senses. Now you know the famous moonshot. And they took photographs and they show nothing up there. Prabhupada says that there are higher classes of human beings, but they are not perceivable by the gross senses. Just like, now what does this mean? It means that there is life on other planets, but we may not be able to see it always with our eyes. Is it possible to see everything with your eyes? Chicago Bears? Huh? No. Give me an example of something you can't see with your eyes.
Navi.
Very good. First class answer. I'll give you another example. The mind. Right? Do you have any doubt that I have a mind? But you can't see it. So some things are too subtle, right? Too fine. Not only are some things, you get the example of an atom, but an atom could be seen with an electron microscope. They could see it. Not exactly, but they can see its movements. They can perceive it. But you can't perceive the mind. Not with a microscope. They have other equipment to measure the movement of the mind. So some things are too subtle to see. And there is life on other planets. But it's a different form of life than we know. It's not with this gross type of body as we see it. And therefore, even if they can land on the moon, it will be like it's vacant. I can give a good example to help you understand. So now, in this room, what is happening right now? There's a lecture going on, right? How many people are in here? About 60 people? Okay? Now, if you had to write a report for your school about tonight's program at your home, you would say, there were 60 people gathered in my house and we were hearing about the Bhagavad-gita, right? Now, supposing that a little ant came into this room right now. And ants, they have eyes, right? And he looked around. What would he see? No. He might be seeing 60 mountains. He doesn't know that you're a person. As far as he's concerned, you're a mountain. So when he has to write his report, he says that I came in there and there was no food and 60 mountains. That's what he's looking for, food. He said, I couldn't find anything to eat and there was just these big mountains, one after another. No use going to that planet. This is the same thing the scientists do. They go to the moon and with their ant-like brains, they look around and say, nothing here. What is the problem? They don't have advanced intelligence to be able to see the type of life that exists on that moon planet. That is the problem. It is a question of consciousness. They are not so intelligent. Just as an ant is not intelligent enough to understand what is in this room, human beings from this planet are not intelligent enough to understand what is going on the higher planets. And therefore, they conclude that there's no life on any of these planets, and the only place that has life is here. Just like the ants, they think the only place that has life is their anthill. Everyone is egocentric. Everyone is thinking, I'm important, and everyone understands everything in terms of themselves. According to Vedic opinion, this is the next text, there are two ways of passing from this world. One in light and one in darkness. When one passes in light, he does not come back. But when one passes in darkness, he returns. So, from this, you may be thinking, well, we better find out exactly what day it is or when it is, so when I die, I can make sure that I can die at the right time. But can you control when you will die? Is it possible? Not usually. Most people cannot control it. So it seems that they're just going to have to depend on good fortune, or if they're yogis, they can control it. But now, look at Arjuna. Arjuna is not the kind of yogi that we saw in that picture. Right? He's not the kind of yogi that sits down and does all this type of meditation and tapasya. He's a Kshatriya. So what about him? Now Krishna tells Arjuna, although the devotees, Arjuna is a devotee, isn't he? A bhakta. Remember what Krishna tells Arjuna? Because you're my devotee, Arjuna, I'm teaching you. Because although the devotees know about these two paths, O Arjuna, they are never bewildered. Therefore, be always fixed in devotion. Prabhupada says Krishna is here advising Arjuna that he should not be disturbed by the different paths the soul can take when leaving the material world. A devotee of the Supreme Lord should not worry whether he will depart by arrangement or by accident. The devotee should be firmly established in Krishna consciousness and chant Hare Krishna,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
He should know that concern over either of these two paths is troublesome. The best way to be absorbed in Krishna consciousness is to be always dovetailed in his service. And this will make one's path to the spiritual kingdom safe, certain, and direct. And then the next verse. A person who accepts the path of devotional service is not bereft of the results derived from studying the Vedas, performing austere sacrifices, giving charity, or pursuing philosophical and fruitive activities. Simply by performing devotional service, he attains all these, and at the end he reaches the supreme eternal abode. This verse we read on a previous day at one program. Remember, I jumped ahead to the final verse. So here we find that one who is a devotee of Krishna automatically gets the results which come from yoga, from karma, from gyan, from all the different types of processes which have been described in earlier chapters. A devotee gets the benefit of all of these, and at the end, he comes to my supreme abode, Krishna says. So, he tells Arjuna, by all means, Arjuna, be a devotee. And don't be worried about what day it is or what time of the year it is if you have to die. Just remember me. Because he's already told them in an earlier part of the Gita, those who remember me at the time of death attain my supreme abode. Because whatever you remember at the time of death, that will determine your next birth. So what are you going to remember? If you remember what? What are you going to remember? You should remember Krishna, the Supreme Lord. Have you been to our temple? Have you seen the deity of Krishna? So you have to remember how Krishna looks. When you leave your body at the time of death, you should remember Krishna. Then where will you go? Back to Krishna. Whatever you remember at the time of death, that will determine where you go. If you remember your home, then you'll have to take your birth again in this home. So then you'll have to take birth again here, but you may be born as a cockroach. They also take birth in this house. So simply being attached to home is not going to guarantee us a human birth. But if you remember Krishna, then you go back to Krishna. And if you go back to Krishna, then your father and mother and their father and their mother and 21 generations of fathers and mothers, they all go back to Krishna. That's Krishna's promise. Therefore, Krishna tells Arjuna, by all means be a devotee. Because that way you'll not only be benefited, but all of those who are near and dear to you will also be. This is the teaching of this chapter, attaining the Supreme. Now in the next chapter, we find more or less a very similar discussion is taking place on many topics which we have heard before. That chapter is called The Most Confidential Knowledge. If you remember, chapter 7 was called Knowledge of the Absolute. So again, we're getting knowledge. But this knowledge is most confidential. What does confidential mean? It means that this knowledge is only going to be shared with those who are qualified. And in the very beginning, we find Krishna telling Arjuna what is the qualification. He says, "My dear Arjuna, because you are never envious of me, I shall impart to you this most confidential knowledge and realization, knowing which you shall be relieved of the miseries of material existence." This is significant. Because you are never envious of me. What does that mean? It means that some people are envious of Krishna. Who are they? Who do you think is envious of God?
Atheist.
Practically in the previous chapter we heard that there are 4 types of persons who are Duskritina. The Mudhas, the Naradamas, the Mayabrita-ganis, and the Asuras, the demons. So, and we can add to that this class of impersonalists. Those who say God is without form. Is God with form or without? He must be with form. So, anyone who denies the existence of God, or anyone who is overly concerned with his own existence, more than with God's existence, is called envious. Why have we come in this material world? Because we're envious of God. Otherwise, why else would we come here? So when you give up your envy, you're called a devotee. And it is to the devotees that this confidential knowledge is being revealed, not to anyone else. They may read, but they cannot understand. And the proof of it is that there are many, many persons, like even many Mayavadis, they can recite all 800 shlokas of the Gita, but they don't understand the conclusion of the Gita. They don't surrender to Krishna. They say that that's not the goal. So even though they memorize every verse, the realization of the meaning is closed to them. They cannot find it. Whereas a devotee, just like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu went to South India, and he met that Brahmin who was crying while he was reading the Gita. And all the other Brahmins were laughing at him. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu inquired why. He said, "They're laughing at me because I cannot read very perfectly." But then why are you crying? What are you doing? My guru told me that every day I should read the Gita, and I have faith in my guru's words, but I cannot read very perfectly. Then why are you crying? Because I am simply remembering how kind Krishna is, that he has become the servant, the chariot driver for his devotee Arjuna. And I am simply seeing in my mind Krishna holding the reins of that chariot for Arjuna. And I am thinking how kind my Lord is. Lord Chaitanya embraced this Brahmin, and he said that actually you are the real scholar of Gita. So, for a devotee, the real meaning of the Gita is revealed. And what is the benefit of getting this confidential knowledge? You shall be relieved of the miseries of material existence. That is the benefit. Relief from the miseries of material existence. What are those miseries? Adhyatmic. Miseries caused by what? Mind and body. Adibodhic. Miseries caused by other living entities. Adidaivic. Miseries caused by natural disturbances from the demigods. We're all suffering. And if you get this knowledge, you get free from suffering. Is there anyone who doesn't want freedom from suffering? Practically, that's all we want. We can say that practically most of our time and energy is simply spent in getting relief from material suffering. You say that you're working hard to become happy. I say no, you're working hard just to mitigate suffering. What you call happiness is only the space of time between two periods of suffering. That is your happiness. Just like in the old days when they would take a criminal and they would dunk them under the water. They called this a dunking stool. They would tie the criminal to a stool, to a chair. And they would put the chair under the water. And the criminal would be swallowing water. And when he was almost drowned, they'd pull him out of the water on a pole. You've seen in India how they have that thing where they water the fields, you know? They stand on one end and it dips in, and then... So imagine if on one end there's a dunking stool, and it goes under the water. And when he's almost drowning, they pick him up. And he spits out the water. And he's, and he feels so much relief. And as soon as he feels a little relief, dunked again. And then up. So his happiness, what is that happiness? He thinks that when he comes out of the water, that is happiness. Is it happiness? Certainly not. It's relief from misery. So our happiness is like that. When the miserable problems of life cease for a few moments, we think, I'm happy, I'm happy. Take a photograph. Turn on the tape recorder. Record it. Because any moment I'm going to suffer again. This is what it is. People celebrate, let's go out. And the next day they get some bad news. Bang, finished. This is material life. Material life is like that. Sukha dukkha, dukkhalayam. It is full of suffering. This knowledge is supposed to bring you into a state of existence which is free from all suffering. That's what it says here. Relieved of the miseries of material existence. This knowledge is the king of education. The king of education. Raja Vidya. The most secret of all secrets. Raja Guyam. Guyam means something hidden. And this is this most hidden thing of all hidden things. It is the purest knowledge. And because it gives direct perception of the self by realization, it is the perfection of religion. This is the purpose of religion. The purpose of religion is Direct perception of the self by realization. That's how you see yourself. By realization. Not with these eyes. You cannot see yourself with these eyes. You see it through realization. Means through elevation of consciousness. You can see the self. So this is a knowledge which will promote you or elevate you to a higher level of consciousness, by which you can see yourself. That self-awareness is called Vishuddhasattva. It is the condition of pure goodness. And it is the state in which one develops ecstatic love for God. When you see yourself, it means you understand your real nature, your real identity. And when we say what the real identity means, what? Not just that I'm the soul, but that I'm the pure servant of God. And how will I serve God? In what mood will I serve God? That is real self-realization. That is what we have to come to understand. Now we're all sitting here, and at best we can say, Aham Brahmasmi, I am pure spirit, or I am Krishna Das, Krishna Dasi. That's as far as we can go. But we have to get to the point where we can say, just exactly who are we as Krishna Das or Krishna Dasi? We should be able to say one day, you should be able to know one day, who is your spiritual father? Who is your spiritual mother in the spiritual world? Who are you? What is your name and address? Prabhupada said. We should know God's name and address means we have to know our name and address also. Just like now you can say, I live in Sugar Land. So you should be able to say, one day, I live in such and such place in Vrindavan. And this is my parents, this is my service, and this is who I am. And that realization will come to you by the grace of transcendental knowledge, especially when that knowledge is infused with this power of devotion. Knowledge in itself cannot reveal this confidential information. But knowledge which is mixed with service, it reveals everything. So that means simultaneously you have to study and serve. Practical, tangible service. And these two things together will give you self-realization. This knowledge is everlasting. That means once you get this, you never lose it. Sometimes you may become unconscious, still you will not lose it. Even you leave your body, you will not lose it. It is everlasting. It stays. It is the unfolding of your true identity. Whatever degree of advancement you make in this lifetime, you begin in the next lifetime where you left off. Nothing is lost. Therefore it is said that this knowledge is everlasting. It is carried even into the next birth, if you take another birth. You will not lose it. And it is not by chance that you have got it now. It's due to many pious activities that one is fortunate enough to take a good birth, just like to be born in Varsa, or at this time now, practically it's a good fortune to be born anywhere in the world because of the Hare Krishna movement. Even in Russia it's okay. Everywhere you go in the world now you can get to hear this transcendental knowledge. It's so fortunate. Because of Lord Chaitanya, because of Prabhupada, because of the disciplic succession, because of Prabhupada's devotees, and all over the world now, this Krishna consciousness knowledge is available. This Raja Vidya Raja Guyam, most confidential secret, is being revealed worldwide by the grace of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his followers. Prabhupada comments on the words pavitram itam uttamam. Pavitra means the purest, the purest thing of all. And he says that is devotional service. In other words, what is going to be revealed in this chapter is devotional service to the Lord. And devotional service, why is it called the purest of all? Because it can purify you of all sins. And the verse is quoted here from the Padma Purana, Aparabda phalam papam kutam bijam phalan mukam kramhena eva pralayata Vishnu Bhakti ratatmanam. Vishnu Bhakti, devotional service to Lord Vishnu, purifies all the different parts of the chain of sinful action. The desire to commit the sin, the reaction which is in waiting to be, which is coming, the sinful reaction that has come. All of these things become purified by the process of bhakti, Vishnu Bhakti. And that process of Vishnu Bhakti is going to be revealed in this chapter. And when you get purified of all sins, what does it mean? No more suffering. Why are we suffering? Because of our past sins. So, not just past sins, but past desires. Our desires for sin, which is all lying in the heart now, is going to be the cause of our future sins. So, this knowledge, devotional service to the Lord, when we can perform devotional service to the Lord, we will be relieved of sins past, present, and future. Those who are not faithful in this devotional service cannot attain me, O conqueror of enemies. The same point as earlier. 4 types of persons cannot attain me. Right? Again, Krishna says, those who are not faithful. Therefore, they return to the path of birth and death in this material world. Remember, in the past chapter, we were hearing about Brahma's day. The host of beings is created, and it's annihilated, and then again created again and again and again and again through each day of Brahma. The material manifestation takes place. So again, the same point. Therefore, they return to the path of birth and death in this material world. Who? Those who are not faithful in the path of devotional service. That means that even if someone is a big Jnani or a big Karmi, if they're a big Karmi, they can go up to Svargaloka. But Bhagavad-gita says, after a certain time, when their piety has been used up, they come and take birth again. They fall down. And if they go into the Brahman, they fall down. Yayanye Ravindaksha Muktamani Nas. This verse describes how one who goes to the Brahmajyoti falls down again. Just like a person who goes up in an airplane but doesn't land any special place must come down. So Brahmajyoti is like that. It is not, there's no proper footing, no shelter at Krishna's feet. So one who goes into Brahmajyoti is like an airplane going up, must come down. They return to this path. Prabhupada says the development of that faith is the process of Krishna consciousness. There are 3 divisions of Krishna conscious men. In the 3rd class are those who have no faith. Even if they are officially engaged in devotional service, they cannot achieve the highest perfectional stage. Most probably they will slip after some time. They may become engaged, but because they haven't complete conviction and faith, it is very difficult for them to continue in Krishna consciousness. Kanista persons, Kanista adhikari. Then Madhyam means they have got full faith, but maybe not perfect knowledge. They're fixed. They cannot be deviated. And Uttama Bhakta, the highest, he has got full faith and perfect knowledge also. we will stop here and ask for some questions.